Affirmative action, I presume? Try not to break anything. The manager's voice dripped with disdain in the lavish boardroom. He had no clue this intern could buy the entire building with a single phone call. The silence in the 47th floor boardroom of Apex Global Investments was as sharp and cold as the glass walls that enclosed it. It was a silence of money, power, and the unspoken rules that govern both. Imani Carter, 30 years old and dressed in a modest but perfectly pressed department store suit, felt the weight of that silence settle on her shoulders. She sat at the obsidian conference table, a surface so polished it reflected the nervous faces of the 6 other interns seated around it. Her leather portfolio, worn at the edges from years of genuine use, rested in her lap, a stark contrast to the gleaming, brand-new accessories of her peers. Gregory Vance, a senior manager whose tailored suit probably cost more than Imani's rent, didn't look up from his phone. He slid a stack of intern onboarding documents across the table with a flick of his wrist. The gesture was a masterpiece of casual contempt. "Look what the cat dragged in," he murmured, his voice a low drawl meant for everyone to hear. Or should I say, what affirmative action dragged in? A few of the interns shifted uncomfortably. One, a blonde woman named Tiffany Blake, let out a small, sharp giggle she quickly stifled behind a perfectly manicured hand. Imani remained perfectly still. Her expression was a calm, unreadable mask. She had prepared for this. She had anticipated the condescension, the immediate judgment based on the color of her skin and her deliberately understated appearance. But anticipation was a mental exercise. The reality of it was a cold, not tightening in her stomach. Did you even graduate from a real college? Or was it one of those community efforts? Gregory continued, finally lifting his eyes. They were pale blue, cold, and held a predatory glint. He scanned her from head to toe, his lip curling in a faint sneer. "I graduated," Imani said, her voice even and low, betraying none of the fury simmering beneath the surface. "I'm sure you did." The sarcasm was thick enough to cut with a knife. He stood up, stretching theatrically. "Well, welcome to the big leagues. Here at Apex, we value excellence, not tokenism. Try to keep up." He walked over to a side table laden with refreshments for the executive team that would be meeting later. He picked up a tall glass of vibrant green juice, a concoction of kale, spinach, and other expensive, virtuous ingredients. As he turned back toward the table, he seemed to stumble, his body lurching in an unconvincing display of clumsiness. The glass tumbled from his hand. Time seemed to slow as the thick, emerald liquid arced through the air. It landed with a sickening splash on the polished table, splattering across Imani's resume and soaking the sleeve of her beige blazer. Droplets of green clung to her papers like toxic dew. "Oops," Gregory said, his smile a razor-thin line. "Clumsy me." He looked directly at Imani, his eyes challenging her. "Might want to clean that up before the real executives arrive. We wouldn't want them to think our interns are messy." The other interns stared, frozen in a mixture of shock and secondhand embarrassment. Tiffany Blake, however, had her phone angled just so, discreetly filming the entire exchange. A tiny red light indicated she was live. Imani's hands, resting in her lap, did not tremble. She slowly raised her gaze to meet Gregory's. For a moment, she let him see the steel behind her eyes, a flicker of the power she held in reserve. Deep within her portfolio, unseen by anyone, a JP Morgan reserve card, forged from palladium and laser engraved, felt cool against her fingertips. It was a tangible reminder of the world she came from, a world Gregory couldn't even begin to imagine she belonged to. She had a choice. She could react, defend herself, and escalate the situation. Or she could absorb the humiliation, file it away, and let his arrogance become the very instrument of his downfall. Her silence, she knew, was a weapon, and she intended to wield it with surgical precision. Without a word, she stood up, picked up a handful of napkins from the refreshment table, and began to carefully blot the green juice from the obsidian surface. She cleaned with a slow, deliberate grace, her movements economical and precise. She didn't wipe her stained blazer or her ruined resume. She simply cleaned his mess, just as he had commanded. Gregory watched her, a smug, triumphant look on his face. He believed he had won. He believed he had put the diversity hire in her place. He turned to the other interns, his voice booming with authority. All right, now that the spill has been handled, let's talk about your assignments. He handed out portfolios with a flourish. Brad, you'll be shadowing the mergers and acquisitions team. High stakes, high reward. Don't disappoint me. Brad, a confident young man from Wharton, nodded eagerly. Jessica, you're with corporate restructuring. We're getting a company in the Midwest. It'll be a bloodbath. You'll love it. His finger, manicured and cruel, stopped at Imani. He tapped her name on the list as if it were something distasteful. And you, Carter, is it? Imani Carter, she corrected him softly. Right? You'll be on administrative support. That means coffee runs, photocopying, filing. We'll see if you can handle that level of responsibility. His tone implied she probably couldn't. The insult was blatant, a public demotion designed to break her spirit on day one. Tiffany's live stream chat was likely exploding with laughing emojis. Imani simply nodded. I understand. Good. Gregory smirked. He leaned in, lowering his voice so only she and the interns nearest her could hear. And Imani? Like that ancient African queen, right? Powerful name. Let's see if he can live up to it. His smile was predatory. Somehow, I doubt it. He walked away, leaving her standing in the shadow of his arrogance. The clock on the wall read 9:15 a.m. The board meeting, the Real board meeting where her true purpose would be revealed, was at 6 p.m. 8 hours and 45 minutes. A lifetime. Imani took a slow, deep breath. The game had just begun. The first hour of Imani's internship was a masterclass in systematic marginalization. While the other interns were whisked away to shadow high-powered teams, Imani was handed a list of coffee orders by Gregory's executive assistant, a severe-looking woman named Patricia who peered at her over the top of her glasses as if she were a particularly complex stain on the carpet. The orders are on the board, Patricia said, her voice clipped and devoid of warmth. 12 different preferences. Get a single one wrong, and you'll hear about it. We don't tolerate mistakes here, not even from, well, not from anyone. The unspoken end to her sentence hung in the air, especially not from you. Imani studied the list. It was a symphony of pretentious caffeine demands. A half-calf soy milk latte at exactly 150 degrees. An iced Americano with a single, specific brand of oat milk. Gregory's order was circled in red ink, a bullseye of malice. Double-shot espresso, macadamia nut milk, 1 pump of sugar-free vanilla, stirred twice counterclockwise, and served at precisely 140 degrees. Don't screw this up. Downstairs in the bustling, artisan coffee shop in the building's lobby, Imani waited for the complex orders to be filled. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She glanced around before pulling it out. The screen displayed a notification from a secure server, Carter Meridian Capital. Q3 Global Asset Allocation Report ready for review. She quickly swiped it away. A moment later, a text message appeared. Imani, your 6 p.m. presentation materials are finalized. Should I have James set up the conference room with the secure video link to the London office? It was from her own executive assistant, a man who managed a team of 10 people dedicated to supporting her. She typed a quick reply. No, regular elevator is fine. Maintaining cover until tonight. Delete this. She then deleted the entire thread and slipped the phone back in her pocket, her face a mask of serene focus as the barista called out the first of the 12 names. Back on the 47th floor, Imani distributed the drinks with the quiet efficiency of a seasoned professional. She navigated the maze of cubicles and offices, placing each cup on the correct desk with a soft, "Here you go." Most employees barely acknowledged her, too engrossed in their spreadsheets and calls. Some offered fleeting, sympathetic glances. When she reached Gregory's office, she knocked softly on the glass door. Finally, he barked without looking up from his triple monitor setup. "Set it down and get out. I have actual work to do." As Imani placed the cup on his coaster, she let her eyes drift to his main screen. He was toggling between windows, but she had a photographic memory. For a fraction of a second, she saw an email thread. The subject line was the diversity problem. Her eyes scanned the sender and recipient list. Gregory Vance, Sarah Chun, head of acquisitions, Michael Torres, head of risk management. Her mind captured the names and the date. It was a thread from last week. Another window showed an instant message chat. A colleague had written, "How's the new intern working out? The one HR forced on you." Gregory's reply was on the screen. "About as well as you'd expect. Can barely handle a coffee order. Useless. Something wrong?" Gregory's voice was sharp, laced with suspicion. He had noticed her momentary pause. "No, sir," Imani replied smoothly, her gaze returning to his face. "Is there anything else you need?" "Yeah," he sneered. "Stay out of my way." Her next assignment was the copy room. It was a windowless, humming cavern filled with the smell of hot toner and old paper. Industrial printers lined one wall, and floor-to-ceiling filing cabinets filled the others. It was where careers came to die. As she began the Sisyphean task of organizing years of poorly filed documents, she became aware of the office's social currents. Employees would walk by the open door, some slowing their pace to stare, their expressions a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. Tiffany Blake made several passes, her phone held aloft. "Hey guys, just checking in on our intern," she'd whisper to her live stream audience. "She's in the copy room now. So sad. I'm trying to be supportive, but what can you do? Hashtag corporate life, hashtag intern struggles." The comments on her stream, which Imani had briefly glimpsed on another intern's phone, were a toxic mix of mockery and feigned sympathy. It was in this sterile purgatory that she met Mr. Henderson. He was an older black man, probably in his late 60s, with kind, weary eyes and hands that were gnarled from a lifetime of hard work. He pushed a cleaning cart, moving with a slow, deliberate rhythm that went unnoticed by the high-flying executives on the floor. He was, in his own way, as invisible as Imani was pretending to be. He paused at the doorway of the copy room, watching her. She wasn't just filing. She was creating a system, organizing the chaotic mess with a librarian's precision, her movements fluid and intelligent. "You all right, young lady?" he asked, his voice a low, gentle rumble. Imani looked up, surprised by the direct address and the genuine concern in his tone. It was the first kindness she had been shown all day. "I'm fine. Thank you," she said, a small, genuine smile touching her lips for the first time. "I've seen a lot of interns come and go from this room," Mr. Henderson continued, leaning against the doorframe. He polished a brass handle on his cart with a soft cloth. "Most of the ones they stick in here don't last a week. They get that look in their eye, the one that says they've given up." He looked at her thoughtfully. "You don't have that look. You got a fire in you. I can see it." Before Imani could respond, Tiffany appeared again, her phone a weaponized extension of her arm. "Still at it? Wow, you're just so dedicated. My followers are, super impressed with your work ethic." Her voice was syrupy sweet, but her eyes were cold. The viewer count on her screen had ticked past 2,000. Comments flooded the display. "OMG, she's still in there. This is painful to watch. Someone give her a real job, LOL." Mr. Henderson straightened up, his presence suddenly filling the doorway. He looked at Tiffany, his gaze steady and disapproving. "The young lady is doing her work. Maybe you should go and do yours." Tiffany rolled her eyes, unfazed. "I'm just documenting the corporate experience, Grandpa. It's called content." She flounced away, her laughter echoing down the hall. Imani looked at Mr. Henderson, a silent thank you passing between them. He simply nodded, a shared understanding in his eyes. He knew injustice when he saw it. He had probably been seeing it on these floors for decades. "Don't you mind them," he said, his voice firm. "You just keep that fire burning. Sometimes a little fire is all you need to burn down a whole rotten forest." He wheeled his cart away, leaving Imani alone with the humming printers and his prophetic words. She returned to her filing, but now her work felt different. It was no longer a humiliating task. It was a cover. Every document she touched, every file she organized, was a moment she was gathering intelligence, observing the system from its most overlooked vantage point. She was a ghost in the machine, and the machine had no idea she was about to haunt it. Lunchtime offered no reprieve. Imani sat alone at a small table in the corner of the sprawling, sun-drenched cafeteria, methodically eating a sandwich she'd brought from home. She used the time to review the notes she'd been taking in a small, unassuming notebook. Names, times, direct quotes, a precise, damning log of every microaggression and discriminatory act she had witnessed. Across the room, Gregory Vance held court at a large table with his two key lieutenants, Sarah Chun and Michael Torres, along with a rotating cast of junior associates eager to bask in his toxic glow. His voice, loud and self-important, carried easily across the polished floors. Honestly, I don't know what HR was thinking, he boomed, leaning back in his chair. We're running a multi-billion-dollar investment firm, not a social justice charity. The pressure for diversity hiring from aboard is getting completely out of hand. His audience chuckled appreciatively. Sarah Chun, a sharp-featured woman in her 40s, nodded vigorously. You're right, Greg. We need qualified candidates, not social experiments. The girl can barely handle a list of coffee orders. How is she supposed to understand complex derivatives? Imani's pen moved swiftly across the page of her notebook. 12:35 p.m. Cafeteria. G. Vance S. Chun M. Torres present. Public questioning of my qualifications. Use of terms charity and social experiment in reference to diversity hiring. Her phone vibrated silently in her lap. A new message. Board meeting confirmed for 6 p.m. sharp. All materials are ready. Will you require the private elevator from the garage, Imani? James! She glanced around the cafeteria, her eyes briefly locking with Tiffany Blake, who was still live-streaming from her table, her phone propped up against a bottle of sparkling water. The chat was now filled with people placing bets on how long Imani would last a day. Imani typed a quick reply to James. Standard elevator is fine. Maintaining cover until the final reveal. At 1:15 p.m., the humiliation escalated from passive mockery to active, orchestrated cruelty. Gregory summoned all the interns, along with 23 other employees, including Sarah and Michael, to the main conference room. He called it an educational demonstration. Today, Gregory announced, his eyes fixed on Imani, we're going to review some basic financial concepts. It's crucial that everyone, no matter their background, has a firm grasp of the fundamentals. Tiffany positioned her phone for the best possible angle, her viewer count swelling to over 3,500. The chat was a frenzy of anticipation. OMG, he's going to quiz her in front of everyone. This is next-level bullying. Someone from HR needs to stop this now. Imani, Gregory said, his voice dripping with false patience. Why don't you start us off? Can you explain what ROI means? It was a softball question, a trap designed to make her look either ignorant if she got it wrong, or like a textbook reciting robot if she got it right. Return on investment, Imani said, her voice calm and clear. It's the ratio of net profit to the cost of the investment, typically expressed as a percentage to measure an investment's efficiency. Her answer was precise, confident, and delivered without a hint of hesitation. A flicker of annoyance crossed Gregory's face. Lucky guess. How about EBITDA? Earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, she replied instantly. It's a measure of a company's overall operational profitability, used as an alternative to net income in some contexts. The room grew quieter. The junior associates who had been snickering now looked intrigued. This wasn't the fumbling, unqualified intern they had been led to expect. Gregory's jaw tightened. He wasn't just testing her anymore. He was trying to break her. Quantitative easing. A monetary policy whereby a central bank purchases predetermined amounts of government bonds or other financial assets in order to inject money into the economy and expand economic activity. Alpha. A measure of the active return on an investment, the performance of that investment compared with a suitable benchmark index. An alpha of 1% means the investment's return on a risk-adjusted basis is 1% better than the benchmarks. He was losing control. The demonstration of her incompetence was rapidly turning into a showcase of her expertise. Desperate, he opened his laptop and projected a complex, data-dense quarterly earnings report from a struggling tech company onto the massive wall screen. Since you're so confident, walk us through this. Explain the cash flow statement to everyone here. In detail, the screen was a dizzying wall of numbers. Employees leaned forward, many now filming on their own phones. The narrative was shifting, and they didn't want to miss the climax. Imani stood and walked to the front of the room. She studied the document for no more than 30 seconds, her eyes scanning the columns with an intensity that made the room hold its breath. Then, she began to speak, her voice taking on a new tone of quiet authority. The statement of cash flows is interesting, she began. The operating cash flow is positive at $47.3 million, which indicates strong core business performance. That's the headline number they want you to see. She pointed to another section of the report. However, the financing activities show a cash inflow of $12.8 million, which suggests they're taking on significant new debt, likely to service existing loans or cover other shortfalls. That's a red flag. She moved to another line item. Furthermore, the investing activities show a cash outflow of only $8.2 million, a sharp decrease from the previous quarter. This signals a major reduction in capital expenditure. They're not investing in new equipment, R&D, or growth. They're in survival mode. Her analysis was flawless, insightful, and far beyond the level of any intern. She wasn't just reading the numbers. She was telling the story behind them. She was connecting the dots in a way that even some of the senior analysts in the room had missed. The room was utterly silent, captivated. Gregory's face was a mask of crimson fury. The trap had backfired spectacularly, making him look foolish in front of his own team. Anyone can memorize textbook definitions and read a spreadsheet, he snapped, his voice cracking. Real business acumen requires instinct. It requires connections. It requires breeding. The word hung in the air, ugly and venomous. Breeding. A collective gasp went through the room. Several employees exchanged horrified glances. The subtext was no longer subtext. It was text. He had said the quiet part out loud. Tiffany's live stream chat exploded. Did he just say breeding? OMG, I have this recorded. This is a lawsuit. Hashtag Apex Global Racism. Gregory seemed to realize his mistake, but the damage was done. He had intended to expose Imani as an incompetent fraud. Instead, in front of dozens of witnesses and thousands of viewers online, he had exposed himself as a bitter, prejudiced bigot. And Imani had captured it all, not just on video, but in the precise, elegant script of her notebook. The public humiliation had not chastened Gregory. It had made him more dangerous. Like a cornered animal, he retreated to his glass-walled office, his face a thunderous mask. He immediately summoned his two most trusted allies, Sarah Chun and Michael Torres. The door was left slightly ajar, a testament to his arrogance. He didn't believe anyone would dare to listen. But Imani was no longer just an intern. She was an intelligence operative on a mission, tasked with delivering a stack of files to a nearby office. She timed her route perfectly, her soft-soled shoes making no sound on the polished marble floor. She paused at a filing cabinet just outside his office, pretending to search for a document. Her body angled away, but her ears tuned to the venom spilling from the room. She's making me look like a fool. Gregory's voice was a low, furious hiss. That little stunt in the conference room. She was trying to undermine me. We need to get rid of her before she causes any more problems. Imani's hand remained steady as she sorted through the files, her breathing even. She was a statue of calm amidst the brewing storm. Claim she's disruptive, Sarah Chen's sharp voice suggested. Say she's creating a hostile environment. We could get a few of the other interns to back us up. The blonde one, Tiffany, she'll say whatever we want. That's too subjective, Michael Torres countered, his tone more pragmatic. It becomes a he said, she said situation. We need something concrete, something HR can't ignore. There was a pause. Imani could almost hear the gears of conspiracy turning. Let's say she's a security risk. Say she's not following safety protocols. That's grounds for immediate dismissal. Gregory's laugh was a cruel, sharp bark of sound. I like that. I like that a lot. Frame it as a liability issue. Say she was caught accessing confidential documents she wasn't authorized to see. Corporate will back us up 100%. They're terrified of data breaches. Perfect, Sarah said. Patricia can draw up the incident report. We'll have on HR's desk by 4 o'clock. Imani moved on, the files in her hand feeling heavier now. They had a plan. A vicious, calculated plan to destroy her reputation and career, all based on a lie. Just as she rounded the corner, her phone vibrated. It was a text from an unknown number. Her heart gave a slight jolt. Ms. Carter, this is Jamal Williams from Building Security. We need to talk. Staff break room, level 42. It's important. Her mind raced. How did he know her name? How did he get her number? She weighed the risks. It could be a trap, or it could be a lifeline. She chose to trust her instincts. The 42nd floor staff break room was a world away from the sleek, impersonal luxury of the executive suites. It was small with mismatched chairs, a humming vending machine, and the lingering smell of burnt coffee. Jamal Williams was waiting for her, a tall, broad-shouldered man in his late 30s. His security uniform was immaculate, and his expression was grim. He held out a cup of coffee. I figured you could use a real one, he said, his voice a low baritone. Thank you, Mr. Williams, Imani said, taking the cup. How do you know who I am? I remember where I've seen you, he said quietly, his eyes scanning the hallway to ensure they were alone. 3 months ago, you did a full security audit of this building with the top brass from Carter Meridian Capital. You were asking about surveillance blind spots, employee access protocols, satisfaction surveys. You were in charge. Imani's composure didn't waver, but her eyes sharpened. He had a good memory. I've been watching what's been happening upstairs today, Jamal continued, his voice filled with a weary frustration. That Tiffany girl's live stream has over 8,000 viewers now. People are recording everything. It's a mess. But I also heard something else. I heard Vance talking to HR. He's filing a formal complaint against you. He's trying to get you fired. What kind of complaint? Imani asked, though she already knew the answer. Safety violation, Jamal confirmed, his brow furrowed with anger. He's claiming you were accessing restricted areas and handling confidential documents without authorization. It's a lie, I know, but it's the kind of lie that will stick if they push it hard enough. They'll bury you in paperwork and process, and by the time anyone figures out the truth, you'll be long gone. Imani processed this information with the clinical precision of a strategist. The pieces were all falling into place. They weren't just trying to fire her. They were trying to create a permanent black mark on her record. When is he meeting with HR? She asked. 4 o'clock, Jamal replied. His assistant, Patricia, is already preparing the falsified incident reports. They're building a case. Imani checked her watch. It was 2:45 p.m. She had 1 hour and 15 minutes until Gregory's ambush. 2 hours and 15 minutes until her own counteroffensive was scheduled to begin. Jamal, she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. I need a favor. A big one. Can you access the building's complete CCTV system? His eyebrows shot up. That's highly restricted. It depends on what you need. Everything from today, Imani said, her eyes locking onto his. Every camera, every angle. I want footage of Gregory's office, the main conference room, the cafeteria, and the hallway outside his door. I want it all. Jamal stared at her for a long moment, the gravity of her request sinking in. This was beyond a simple favor. This was a career-risking move. But he had seen the look in Gregory's eyes. He had seen the casual cruelty. And he had seen the quiet dignity with which Imani had endured it. Why? He asked, though he already suspected the answer. A small, enigmatic smile touched Imani's lips. It was the first genuine smile she'd shown all day, and it was terrifying. Because Jamal, she said softly, sometimes the truth needs witnesses. And when witnesses aren't enough, it needs irrefutable, time-stamped, high-definition proof. At 3:45 p.m., Imani returned to the 47th floor and walked directly into a storm. The company's social media monitoring team had finally discovered Tiffany's viral livestream. The hashtag Apex Global Racism was trending on Twitter, and clips of Gregory's breeding comment were being shared across LinkedIn, TikTok, and Instagram. The digital wildfire was out of control, and the HR department was in full-blown panic mode. Patricia Hayes, Gregory's assistant, rushed past Imani, her arms laden with legal pads and incident report forms, her face a mask of frantic stress. She didn't even seem to see her. Gregory, however, was undeterred. The viral infamy, rather than shaming him, seemed to have emboldened him. He was a man who believed any attention was good attention, and he was about to double down on his aggression. Emergency meeting, all interns. His voice boomed over the floor's intercom system, sharp and imperious. Conference room. Now, the 7 interns assembled around the obsidian table, the air crackling with tension. The other 5 looked nervous and confused, caught in a drama far beyond their pay grade. Tiffany, though her public live stream had been shut down, was still holding her phone, discreetly recording to her device's camera roll. She was a content creator to the last. Imani sat perfectly still, her hands folded calmly in her lap, a portrait of unnerving serenity. Gregory strode into the room, flanked by Sarah Chun and Michael Torres. They stood behind him like a pair of malevolent gargoyles, their expressions grim and self-righteous. Due to recent, serious disruptions and clear safety violations, Gregory began, his eyes locking onto Imani with laser-like intensity. We are being forced to implement immediate disciplinary measures. Some of you, he let his gaze sweep across the other interns before landing back on Imani, have demonstrated behavior that is fundamentally inconsistent with the values and policies of Apex Global Investments. He let the accusation hang in the air, a poisoned dart aimed directly at her. Imani Carter, he said, savoring her name. You have been observed accessing restricted areas. You have been witnessed handling confidential client materials without authorization. And your generally disruptive behavior has created a hostile and unproductive work environment for your fellow interns. The accusations were so outrageously false that even the other interns, cowed as they were, looked bewildered. Brad, a quiet but observant intern from Northwestern, actually found his voice. Sir, he began, his voice hesitant but clear. With all due respect, Imani hasn't done anything wrong. She's been in the copy room all day. She's actually been helping all of us with our research assignments during her breaks. Gregory's glare could have melted steel. Mr. Patterson, I don't recall asking for your input. Your misplaced loyalty is noted, and it will be reflected in your final evaluation. Brad paled and shrank back in his seat, silenced. Sensing the mood shifting, Tiffany tried to regain control of the narrative for a private recording. He's right, she chimed in, her voice shrill. I saw her. She was definitely acting suspicious all day, sneaking around. It was weird, but the tide was already turning. A crowd of employees had gathered outside the glass walls of the conference room, drawn by the drama. Many of them had seen clips from Tiffany's stream. They knew who the real aggressor was. They were no longer just passive observers. They were a silent jury. Finally, Imani spoke. Her voice, when it came, was not loud, but it cut through the tense atmosphere like a surgeon's scalpel. Mr. Vance, she said, addressing him formally. Are you formally accusing me of professional misconduct? I'm not accusing, he shot back. I'm stating facts. You violated company policy. Multiple times. Today. I see. Imani said, her gaze unwavering. Could you please specify which policies I have violated? Gregory, momentarily thrown by her calm, procedural questioning, fumbled with the papers Patricia had prepared for him. Section 4, subsection 7 of the employee handbook, he read, his voice strained. Unauthorized access to sensitive materials. Thank you for the clarification, Imani said, her tone as polite as if she were asking for directions. And could you please show me these sensitive materials that I allegedly accessed? You know what you did, he blustered. With all due respect, Mr. Vance, I don't, she replied. I'm asking for specificity. What were the documents? When did I access them? Where are they located? And are there any witnesses to this alleged violation, other than Ms. Blake? The conference room fell silent. The employees outside pressed closer to the glass, their phones held high. Gregory's carefully constructed trap was collapsing under the weight of Imani's relentless, dispassionate logic. He had expected tears, fear, or angry denials. He had not expected a cross-examination. His face flushed a deep, blotchy red. He was sputtering, searching for a response, but he had none. His entire case was a fabrication, and it couldn't withstand the slightest scrutiny. At that precise moment, Imani's phone buzzed silently in her lap. She glanced down. It was a text from Jamal. Got all. Every angle. Ready when you are. She looked up from her phone, her eyes meeting Gregory's. Then, she glanced at the large digital clock on the conference room wall. 4 p.m. Exactly. The ambush was over. The real show was about to begin. Imani stood up. The movement was slow, deliberate, and graceful, drawing the eyes of everyone in the room. The collective breath was held. In the charged silence, she walked not to the door, but to Gregory's abandoned laptop, which was still connected to the massive projection screen on the wall. What are you doing? Gregory's voice cracked, a fissure in his crumbling facade of authority. Get away from my computer. That is private property. I just need to show everyone something important, Imani said, her voice calm and steady. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with a practiced, fluid efficiency that spoke of countless hours spent commanding such devices. You left your email open, Mr. Vance. Security, Gregory bellowed, his voice echoing in the suddenly silent room. Get her away from there. Security, but security did not come. Instead, the conference room door swung open, and Jamal Williams stepped inside. He didn't move towards Imani. He simply stood there, arms crossed over his broad chest, a silent, imposing guardian at the gate. His presence sent a clear message. No one is interfering with this. With a few clicks, Imani had Gregory's inbox open. With another, she projected it onto the wall screen for everyone to see. The room let out a collective, audible gasp. The screen was filled with message threads, their subject lines a litany of corporate bigotry. Imani, standing at the front of the room like a prosecutor presenting her case, began to read. Email dated March 15th, she announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the room and to the dozens of phones recording from the hallway. From Gregory Vance. To Sarah Chun. Subject, another diversity hire disaster incoming. These people just don't have the background for our industry. How do we make this stop? Sarah Chun, standing behind Gregory, went bone white. Her eyes darted around the room as if looking for an escape route that didn't exist. Email dated March 22nd. Imani continued, her voice relentless. From Gregory Vance. To Michael Torres. Subject, board pushing affirmative action nonsense. Time to raise our cultural fit standards before we're completely overrun with unqualified candidates. Michael Torres flinched as if he'd been struck. Tiffany's hand was shaking so violently she could barely hold her phone steady. The new, secret recording was capturing every damning word, broadcasting it to a private group of her followers who were no doubt sharing it frantically. Imani scrolled deeper, each click of the mouse a nail in Gregory's professional coffin. A systematic, documented pattern of discrimination, meticulously preserved in his own words on company servers, was being laid bare for the world to see. May 3rd. From Gregory Vance. To Hiring Committee. Regarding candidate Chun Park. Reject. Too ethnic. Won't fit the company culture. May 17th. From Gregory Vance. To Patricia Hayes. Promote Johnson over Martinez. We need the right image in our client-facing roles. Johnson looks the part. June 2nd. From Gregory Vance. To all department heads. Subject, mandatory diversity training. Let's all sit through this nonsense, but let's make sure our teams understand what really matters here. Performance and pedigree. The evidence was devastating, irrefutable, and utterly shocking in its blatant prejudice. Gregory had created an entire shadow system of hiring and promotion, carefully coded to avoid legal tripwires while systematically excluding qualified minority candidates. Finally, Gregory broke. He lunged for the laptop, a desperate, clumsy charge. Stop this. Stop this immediately. You're violating federal privacy laws. Imani stepped aside with the grace of a matador, letting him frantically slam the laptop shut. But the damage was done. The images were burned into the minds of every witness and preserved on dozens of recording devices. "Actually, Mr. Vance, let me address your legal concerns," Imani said. Her voice had shifted. The quiet deference was gone, replaced by an unmistakable tone of command. It was a subtle change, but it made everyone in the room, including Gregory, stand a little straighter. According to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Title VII, as well as several state-level statutes, using company resources to create and perpetuate a discriminatory and hostile work environment constitutes a violation that can waive certain privacy protections, especially during an internal investigation. The legal precision of her statement sent a ripple of shock through the room. This wasn't intern-level knowledge. This was the expertise of a seasoned legal professional or a high-level executive. Furthermore, she continued, her voice gaining strength. Section 1981 of the Civil Rights Act provides for unlimited monetary damages in cases of intentional, race-based employment discrimination. Your emails, Mr. Vance, constitute a written, archived record of intent. It's what lawyers call the smoking gun. Gregory stared at her, his face a maelstrom of rage, fear, and utter confusion. Who the hell are you?" he stammered. Imani reached into her worn leather portfolio. She didn't pull out a phone this time. She pulled out a sleek, platinum-chained ID badge. She let it swing gently from her fingers, the light from the ceiling glinting off the holographic logo. It was the logo for Carter Meridian Capital. "The name is Imani Carter," she said, her voice now resonating with the full force of her authority. The pretense was finally completely dropped. Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer and voting board member of Carter Meridian Capital, the parent company that owns a 67% controlling stake in Apex Global Investments. The name, Carter, hit the room like a physical blow. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a world being turned upside down. Gregory staggered backward, his face draining of all color, his mouth hanging open. The other interns stared, their minds struggling to reconcile the image of the humiliated, coffee-stained woman from this morning with the powerful executive standing before them now. Tiffany's phone slipped from her trembling fingers and clattered onto the obsidian table. "For the past 18 months, Imani announced, her gaze sweeping across the stunned faces, my office has been conducting a comprehensive, undercover assessment of the workplace cultures at our subsidiary companies. Your division, Mr. Vance, was flagged for having the highest rate of minority employee turnover and the most discrimination complaints in our entire global portfolio. I was sent here to find out why." She gestured to the now blank projection screen, where the ghosts of his emails still seemed to linger. "And you, Mr. Vance," she said, her eyes locking onto his. "You show me everything I needed to see." The revelation of Imani's identity had shattered the reality of everyone in the room, but she was just getting started. This wasn't about a dramatic gotcha moment. It was about a systematic dismantling of a toxic culture built on a foundation of cold, hard data. "My presence here was not an act of entrapment, Mr. Vance," Imani stated, her voice crisp and authoritative as she connected her own secure tablet to the projection system. It was a diagnostic tool. For the past 18 months, Carter Meridian Capital has received 23 formal, anonymous complaints regarding discriminatory practices at this specific branch of Apex Global. Our internal employee surveys showed a systemic bias affecting 67% of minority staff. Exit interviews, which you clearly never bothered to read, cited a hostile work environment as the primary factor in 73% of all minority departures. A new set of images flashed onto the screen, graphs, charts, and pull quotes. It was a devastating, data-driven portrait of a department in crisis. "Today's assessment," she continued, her voice unwavering, "has provided comprehensive, qualitative evidence of the root cause." She gestured towards Gregory, who looked as if he might collapse. "A management team that views diversity as a threat to be managed, rather than an asset to be cultivated." Imani then picked up Tiffany's fallen phone from the table. With a few deft swipes, she navigated to the social media app and held it up. "Your performance, Mr. Vance, along with yours, Ms. Blake, has been viewed by over 15,000 people and counting. You haven't just created a hostile work environment within these walls. You have broadcasted clear violations of federal equal employment opportunity laws to the entire world, creating a massive legal and reputational liability for this company. Sarah Chun finally found her voice, a desperate, pleading tone creeping in. Imani, Ms. Carter, we had no idea who you were. If we had known, that is precisely the point, Ms. Chun. Imani cut her off, her gaze like a laser. Your behavior towards someone you perceived as powerless, as less than, reveals your true character. Respect should not be a currency you dispense only to those you believe can benefit you. It should be a fundamental principle. She turned her attention back to the room at large, her voice resonating with moral authority. Today, I was treated as less than human, not because of anything I did or said, but because you believed I had no power to fight back. That reveals more about this company's culture than any annual survey ever could. At that moment, Patricia Hayes, the executive assistant, bustled into the room, clutching a stack of freshly printed incident reports. Mr. Vance, I have the documentation ready for... She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes widening as she took in the scene. Imani at the front of the room, commanding the attention of a terrified management team, with the head of security standing guard at the door. Ms. Hayes, Imani said calmly, her voice leaving no room for argument. Please redirect those incident reports to the shredder. What I will need from you is a comprehensive log of every discriminatory action you have witnessed or been instructed to carry out by Mr. Vance over the past year. Cross-reference it with your emails and the company's CCTV timestamps. Our legal team will be in touch. The power dynamic had not just been reversed, it had been annihilated. But Imani wasn't finished revealing the full scope of her operation. Mr. Henderson, she called out, her voice softening. The crowd of employees in the hallway parted, and the elderly janitor, who had been watching the entire spectacle with a quiet, knowing intensity, stepped hesitantly into the conference room. He was still in his maintenance uniform, a symbol of the invisible workforce that keeps such places running. Could you please join us? Imani asked, gesturing to the empty, high-backed leather chair at the head of the table, Gregory's chair. Mr. Henderson looked confused, but he walked forward and, after a moment's hesitation, sat down. The symbolism was breathtaking and devastating. The janitor, the man of true character, was sitting in the manager's seat of power, while the manager stood powerless, facing his professional execution. Mr. Henderson has worked on this floor for 15 years, Imani announced to the stunned room. He has observed more day-to-day workplace interactions than anyone else in this building. His confidential insights have been an invaluable part of our diversity and inclusion assessment initiative for the past 6 months. Gregory's face went ashen. He realized with dawning horror that the surveillance had not just been top-down. It had been from every angle, including from the people he never bothered to see. In fact, Imani continued, Mr. Henderson provided some of our most detailed reports on the discriminatory language, the exclusion of minority employees from meetings, and the general atmosphere of toxicity on this floor. It seems that people tend to forget that the cleaning staff see and hear everything. The quiet dignity of Mr. Henderson, seated at the head of the table, was a more powerful indictment of Gregory's character than any chart or graph. He represented the humanity that Gregory and his team had so casually dismissed. Tiffany finally broke down completely, her apologies dissolving into incoherent sobs. I didn't know. The live stream was just a joke. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. Imani studied the young woman, not with anger, but with a kind of clinical disappointment. Ms. Blake, you broadcast workplace harassment for social media engagement. You turned another human being's dignity into content. That demonstrates a fundamental lack of empathy and professional judgment that is incompatible with our corporate values. But I didn't know you were important, Tiffany wailed. And that is the most damning admission of all, Imani replied, her voice cutting through the tears. So, harassment is acceptable if the target is someone you deem unimportant? That is the very mentality we are here to eradicate. The evidence was presented. The witnesses had been heard. The moral and ethical bankruptcy of the regime was laid bare. Now, all that was left was the judgment. The emergency board meeting was convened at 6 p.m. sharp in the main executive boardroom on the 48th floor. The room was an oasis of quiet, old-world power, with a massive mahogany table that gleamed under crystal chandeliers. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city sprawled below, a glittering kingdom that Carter Meridian Capital helped to rule. Imani entered, no longer the humble intern in a department store suit, but a commanding executive in a charcoal Armani power suit. Every trace of her earlier persona was gone. She moved with the innate confidence of someone who belonged at the head of this table, making billion-dollar decisions. 8 senior executives from the parent company were present, either in person or via secure video link, alongside 5 board members from Apex Global itself. James, her own executive assistant and a longtime family friend, handed her a leather-bound portfolio. "The evidence compilation is complete." "Imani," he murmured. "Legal has reviewed everything. We are ready to proceed." Imani took her seat at the head of the table. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice resonating with calm authority. "Thank you for convening on such short notice. As you know, my 3-month undercover assessment of Apex Global's New York branch concluded today. The findings are alarming. We are facing a crisis of systematic discrimination that threatens not only our company's moral integrity, but also its legal standing and financial performance." She activated the wall-mounted display system. The first images to appear were Gregory's emails, stark and damning in high definition. "Let's begin with the legal exposure," she said, her tone all business. "Our general counsel has analyzed the communications authored by Senior Manager Gregory Vance. These emails constitute clear, documented violations of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, Section 1981 of the Civil Rights Act, and multiple New York State and city anti-discrimination statutes. The language used demonstrates unambiguous intent to discriminate based on race and national origin." Patricia Wu, the company's general counsel, leaned forward, her expression grim. "What's our potential financial liability on the legal front?" Imani clicked to the next slide. It was a spreadsheet filled with terrifying numbers. "Based on precedent in similar corporate cases, we've broken down the potential costs. Conservative estimates are as follows. $2.3 million in immediate legal defense costs, assuming we are hit with a class action lawsuit, which is likely. $4.7 million in potential settlements to avoid a lengthy and public trial. And an estimated $8.1 million in lost productivity directly attributable to the hostile work environment, calculated from turnover rates and employee disengagement metrics." She paused, letting the numbers sink in. "The total immediate exposure from a purely financial perspective is approximately $15.1 million annually." A low murmur went through the room. The annual profit margin for the New York branch was $23 million. Gregory's toxic fiefdom was costing the company nearly 2/3 of its bottom line. She had successfully transformed a moral problem into a catastrophic business problem that no board member could ignore. Furthermore, Imani continued, clicking to a slide filled with social media analytics, "We have an unquantifiable reputation risk. The live-streamed harassment incident has, as of 1 hour ago, generated over 847,000 views across all platforms. The hashtag Apex Global Racism has been mentioned over 127,000 times. Our stock price dropped 3.2% in after-hours trading as the story began to break." Robert Chun, the chairman of Apex's board, spoke for the first time, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. "How do we let this pattern continue for so long? How do we miss this?" "Because discrimination of this nature operates in the shadows," Robert, Imani replied, her gaze meeting his. "Mr. Vance mastered the art of coded language and plausible deniability. The pattern only becomes clear when someone becomes invisible enough to witness the unvarnished truth. He never would have said these things to me if he knew I was a board member." She clicked to a slide showing personnel data. Under Mr. Vance's management, minority employee retention on his floors dropped to a dismal 23%, compared to a 67% company-wide average. Hiring of diverse candidates fell by 43% over 2 years, and departmental productivity, despite bringing in top talent, declined by 18% due to constant turnover and the corrosive effects of a toxic culture. The CFO, Michael Rodriguez, studied the spreadsheets on his tablet, his face pale. These numbers are catastrophic. How much will a full remediation cost? Imani was prepared. This was the moment she had been working towards. This was not about revenge. It was about rebuilding. I have a 3-phase plan, she announced. Phase 1. Immediate terminations and strategic demotions of all involved parties. Estimated cost, $340,000 in severance and replacement hiring costs. Phase 2. A mandatory, top-to-bottom cultural transformation program, led by a third-party expert. Estimated cost, $890,000 annually. Phase 3. Implementation of new monitoring and compliance systems, including anonymous reporting channels and AI-driven bias detection in communications. Estimated cost, $450,000 for implementation, with $120,000 in annual maintenance. She took a deep breath. The total investment is approximately $1.8 million. The projected return on that investment, in avoided liability and improved productivity alone, is $13.3 million. The business case is irrefutable. Treating people with dignity is not just the right thing to do. It is the most profitable thing to do. The argument was ironclad. She had appealed not just to their morals, but to their wallets. The room was silent, the board members processing the sheer scale of both the problem and the opportunity. The judgment was all but delivered. At that moment, the boardroom doors opened. Jamal, the head of security, escorted Gregory Williams into the room. His arrogance had completely crumbled, replaced by a desperate, wild-eyed panic. Behind him, also under escort, came a sobbing Tiffany Blake, a pale and trembling Sarah Chun, a grim-faced Michael Torres, and a visibly shaken Patricia Hayes. They were lined up before the board like prisoners at a tribunal. Gregory's eyes darted around the table, finally comprehending the sheer power assembled against him. "This is a setup," he blurted out, his voice cracking. "She deliberately deceived us. This is entrapment." Imani's voice was as cold and hard as ice. "Mr. Vance, you had 8 hours today to demonstrate basic human decency. You chose to demonstrate bigotry, cruelty, and a profound lack of judgment. I didn't deceive you. I simply documented your choices." She activated the video footage on the main screen. The room watched in silence as the day's events played out in high-definition clarity. The deliberate spilling of the green juice. The demeaning comments about her intelligence. The public quiz and the breeding comment. The conspiracy to have her fired. Each incident was a nail in his coffin. Jennifer Walsh, Imani's voice narrated over the footage, live-streamed workplace harassment to an audience of thousands, turning systemic discrimination into entertainment content for clicks. Sarah Chun and Michael Torres actively conspired to fabricate a safety violation to illegally terminate an employee. Patricia Hayes knowingly ignored multiple reports of bias and actively enabled this toxic behavior by preparing fraudulent documents. The evidence was overwhelming. "What are your recommendations, Ms. Carter?" Chairman Robert Chin asked, his voice grim. Imani's proposal was swift and decisive. Gregory Vance, immediate termination for cause, no severance package, and a permanent blacklisting from all Carter Meridian Capital companies and their subsidiaries. Tiffany Blake, internship terminated immediately with a full report sent to her university's Dean of Student Conduct. Sarah Chun and Michael Torres, demotion to junior analyst positions with mandatory, intensive bias training and a 2-year probationary period. Patricia Hayes, removal from her HR-adjacent role and reassignment to a non-managerial administrative position in a different department. She wasn't finished. Additionally, I am immediately implementing the Washington Holdings Diversity Excellence Initiative across all of Apex Global. The budget will be $2.1 million annually. It will include mandatory unconscious bias training for all managers, a new anonymous reporting system monitored by a third party, firm diversity hiring targets, and regular, unannounced undercover assessments to ensure compliance. Derek made one last, pathetic plea. "Please," he begged, his eyes scanning the stone-faced board members. "I have a family, a mortgage, 3 kids in private school. I can't lose this job. I'll change. I'll do whatever you want." Imani studied him with a cool, clinical detachment. "Mr. Vance, change requires a genuine acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Can you, right now, articulate precisely why your behavior was not just wrong, but harmful?" Gregory's silence was his final confession. Even with his career on the line, he couldn't grasp the fundamental humanity of his victims. He saw only his own predicament. Your inability to show even a flicker of genuine remorse confirms that termination is the only appropriate path forward, Imani concluded. Chairman Chun called for the formal votes, all in favor of the immediate termination of Gregory Vance. 9 hands raised unanimously, all in favor of the termination of Tiffany Blake's internship. 9 hands again. The votes continued, each one a decisive blow for accountability. The consequences were delivered, not with anger, but with the cold, hard logic of a business decision. Finally, Imani made one last announcement. "I'm also establishing the Henderson Excellence Fund, named in honor of the facility's supervisor, Mr. Henderson, who showed kindness and courage when others chose cruelty. It will be funded with an initial endowment of $500,000 from Carter Meridian Capital, and it will provide annual scholarships for underrepresented minority students pursuing careers in finance." The symbolism was perfect. The janitor who had comforted her would now have an educational fund bearing his name, a permanent legacy of decency in a building that had been so lacking in it. As security began escorting the terminated and demoted employees from the room, their protests and sobs echoing down the marble hallway, Imani watched the sun set over the city. The reckoning was complete. The revolution had been quiet, precise, and devastatingly effective. 3 months later, the 47th floor of Apex Global Investments was unrecognizable. The transformation was not just visible, it was palpable. The oppressive, toxic atmosphere that had once been ruled by Gregory Vance's fear and favoritism had been replaced by a vibrant, collaborative energy. A diverse team of managers, promoted from within and hired from outside, now led with respect and transparency. Imani walked through the halls she had once navigated as a powerless, humiliated intern. Now, employees of all levels greeted her with genuine warmth and respect. They understood that she had risked her own dignity to expose a systemic problem they had all witnessed, but had felt powerless to address. "Good morning, Ms. Carter," called out Brad Patterson, the formerly timid Northwestern intern who had spoken up for her during Gregory's final meltdown. Was now a full-time junior analyst. He had been given a chance to shine under the new leadership, and he was thriving. "How's the transition going, Brad?" Imani asked, pausing at his desk. "It's a night and day difference," he replied honestly, a confident smile on his face. "The new training programs are incredible. People are actually focused on performance and collaboration, not on office politics and backstabbing. It feels like we're all on the same team now." The numbers backed up his assessment. Under the new leadership team, which included a woman of color promoted to Gregory's former position, department productivity had increased by a staggering 23% in just 12 weeks. Employee satisfaction scores, measured through anonymous weekly pulse surveys, had jumped from a dismal 2.1 to a healthy 4.3 out of 5. Most importantly, not a single minority employee had resigned since the reforms had been implemented. The talent drain had been stopped. Imani's phone buzzed. It was a text from Jamal Williams, who had been promoted to head of security operations for the entire building. "Media crew is here for the documentary filming. Conference room is ready when you are." The story of Apex Global's rapid transformation had become a major case study in corporate accountability. Harvard Business School was funding a documentary project to study how quickly a toxic workplace culture could be reformed through decisive, data-driven action. Imani made her way to the same conference room where she had been humiliated just 3 months prior. Now, it was filled with cameras and lighting equipment. "Ms. Carter," the interviewer began, "critics of your undercover operation say that it was deceptive. How do you respond to that?" Imani's answer was measured and confident. "Deception implies a malicious intent to mislead. My intent was to reveal the truth. The only deception present on that day was the belief held by some that they could discriminate without consequences." "What has been the single most significant change you've implemented?" the interviewer asked. "The anonymous reporting system," Imani replied without hesitation. "In the last 3 months, we have received 47 confidential reports of potential bias incidents across all departments. Each one was investigated within 48 hours by a neutral third party and addressed. Previously, these problems would have festered in silence, poisoning the culture from within. Now, they're brought into the light and dealt with. That is true accountability. The system was revolutionary. Employees could report incidents through an encrypted app, ensuring complete protection from retaliation. AI algorithms analyze the reports for patterns, allowing the new HR team to identify emerging problems before they could escalate. The Henderson Excellence Fund was also a resounding success. It had already awarded its first round of 23 scholarships to a brilliant and diverse group of students from underrepresented backgrounds. Mr. Henderson himself sat on the selection committee, his insights into character and resilience proving invaluable. The fund had become a symbol of the company's new commitment to building a better, more inclusive future. The transformation was real, it was working, and it was just the beginning. 1 year later, the story of Imani Carter and the Apex global transformation had traveled far beyond the company's marble halls. The Carter Method, as it had been dubbed by the Harvard Business Review, which involved using strategic, undercover assessments to expose and reform workplace discrimination, had been adopted by 43 other Fortune 500 companies across 7 different industries. What began as one woman's quiet, dignified resistance had sparked a nationwide movement for corporate accountability. The data told a powerful story. Companies that implemented Imani's reforms saw, on average, a 34% increase in minority employee retention, a 28% jump in overall employee satisfaction scores, and a 19% rise in overall productivity. The business case for dignity, which Imani had so powerfully argued in the boardroom, had been proven with irrefutable, industry-wide data. Gregory Vance remained a cautionary tale, a ghost of corporate past. His LinkedIn profile was a barren wasteland, showing continued unemployment. The viral footage of his downfall had made him permanently unemployable in the financial sector. His name was now synonymous with corporate bullying and bigotry. Sometimes, consequences are simply the logical outcome of one's own choices. Tiffany Blake, however, had managed to rebuild her life through what appeared to be genuine transformation. After being expelled from her university's business program, she had enrolled in sociology courses and begun working for a nonprofit organization focused on workplace equity. She often spoke publicly about the profound lessons she had learned from her mistakes, her story serving as a different kind of cautionary tale, one about the seductive dangers of online fame and the importance of empathy. Her redemption story offered hope that people could change when held truly accountable. Mr. Henderson had become an unlikely corporate celebrity. His promotion to facilities director and his central role in the scholarship selection committee had been featured in dozens of articles about recognizing the unsung heroes of the workplace. Companies across America were starting new initiatives to elevate and listen to their long-overlooked employees, recognizing the deep institutional wisdom they possessed. The Henderson Excellence Fund itself had grown to an endowment of $4.2 million, thanks to contributions from other corporations inspired by the story. It was now supporting 156 students, 12 of whom had already graduated and entered careers in finance, carrying forward Imani's vision of inclusive excellence. Imani herself had become one of the most respected voices in corporate America. She had been profiled in Fortune, Forbes, and Time magazine. Her TED Talk, titled The Power of Strategic Vulnerability, had been viewed 3.8 million times. But she rarely accepted speaking engagements, preferring to focus on the real work of driving systemic change. The true ripple effect was not seen in magazine articles or viral videos, but in the daily interactions happening in offices across the country. Managers thought twice before making a dismissive comment. HR departments began to investigate bias reports with genuine seriousness. Employees felt empowered to speak truth to power, knowing that there were systems in place to protect them. The ground had shifted. The revolution was quiet, but it was spreading. The real measure of success, Imani said, looking directly into the camera lens, isn't about punishing the bad actors. That's just a byproduct. The real victory is creating systems and cultures where discrimination simply cannot take root. She was seated in her office for the final scene of the documentary, 1 year after her undercover assessment. Through the window behind her, the bustling, diverse, and productive office floor of Apex Global was visible, a living testament to her work. "Don't wait for a scandal to force you to change," she said, her tone shifting as she began to address the audience directly. The millions of people who would watch this film. These stories of discrimination are not outliers. They happen every single day in offices everywhere. Leaders have a choice: address these problems proactively or wait for them to explode publicly. But I urge you to remember that every employee, from the CEO to the janitor, deserves to be treated with dignity. These are not just business metrics. These are human beings. The camera pushed in closer, creating a sense of intimacy. If you're watching this, and you have ever felt the sting of being underestimated because of your race, your gender, your background, or for any other reason, I want you to know that your experience is valid. Your voice has power. Your story matters. Her gaze was intense, empathetic, and galvanizing. Share your real-life stories in the comments below. Help us all understand the full scope of the workplace bias that still exists. Together, our collective voices can create the accountability that drives real, systemic change. We can build workplaces where merit, character, and collaboration are the only things that matter. She paused, letting her words hang in the air for a moment before delivering her final, powerful call to action. Please comment with respect. Like this video if this story inspired you. Share it with someone who needs to know that their dignity is worth defending. And subscribe for more stories of quiet courage defeating systemic oppression. Remember, she concluded, a faint, determined smile on her lips. You don't have to be loud to be heard. Sometimes, the most powerful revolution begins with one person quietly taking notes and refusing to be silenced.